let's install and configure Aspire on our Linux machine. But we're also going to kick off the development of a new part of the series. We're going to start building a very small but real application that we will work on and then deploy to Azure. We may even do some development work on Windows and Mac as well, just to show how to work in a mixed environment. But for now, let's start by setting up Aspire. Now, this video is part of a series dedicated to developing C# applications on Linux. Along the way, we're going to gain a better knowledge of how Linux works and how to make our apps truly cross-platform. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel to stay informed of new episodes as they come out. And if you're looking for even more .NET, SQL, Aspire, Azure, and AI training, go to imtimcorey.com. All right, let's start by going to Aspire's website, which is aspire.dev. Now, to be clear, this used to be called aspire.net. It is no, or .NET Aspire. It's not .NET Aspire. It is just Aspire because of the fact that it's beyond just .NET. They didn't want to confuse people, which it kind of did, that it was only about .NET. Now, it's still built in .NET, it still runs .NET, it's still primarily a .NET tool, but you can also create an app host out of TypeScript now, and there's probably more coming down the road as they work through those things. But for now, you can use TypeScript if you're in a TypeScript environment and not in a .NET environment. But for us, we're building .NET, therefore the .NET environment is great. So let's go to Aspire 13.2, and here is a bash command. So just copy that, and then can go down to bash. We can Control-Shift and plus to make it a little bit bigger, and we're going to paste and run this. So it's going to run and install Aspire. Once it does, then we're going to restart the terminal. So we can also run that command. We can just restart the terminal, super easy. And again, zoom in here and say Aspire -- version to give us the version number of Aspire. And cool, we are set up on Aspire, which is most of the way there, but let's set up in VS Code now. To do that, we're going to come down to our extensions and search for Aspire. And we'll see the official Aspire extension for VS Code. Let's close out of this Docker prompt here. We can hit install. And it says, cool, we've now got Aspire set up. Now we can just verify the installation. It's going to verify, and yes, it's verified. And then we can create our first project if we want. I'm not going to do that because when you do it this way, you might not know how to do it any other way. So let's just restart Visual Studio Code just to be sure that it has all the latest bits. And we're going to say create new .NET project. It's going to discover the projects. And I'm going to search for Aspire, which it didn't find yet. So we're going to have to restart again because I had this problem before where it kind of glitched out and then it came back. It didn't find the template. Let's just try it one more time. If it doesn't, I will show you what we're going to do instead. So create new project. This is where I'd normally go, and it's not going to show up probably. So it's not showing up. So what we can do instead is we can come down to the terminal. So this is Control and tilde brings that up. And we can say clear. And we do have this exclamation point here that doesn't tell you why it has there we go. The following extension wants to relaunch the terminal to contribute to the environment Git. So we won't worry about that yet. We are going to put this in Git, but for now we'll leave the product not in Git. So just say Aspire new. And it says, hey, what kind of product do you want? So this is one of the things about knowing the CLI is that because you know the CLI, you're never stuck when a tool doesn't work the way you expect it to. Now, I believe that VS Code will probably refresh everything when I restart my machine, but I don't want to do that right now. So instead, I know a CLI and go, not a problem. I can bypass that for now. So we can just use our arrow keys to move up and down and say, I want to use the starter app. Now, if you're building a real production application that is going to be, a real app, I wouldn't do the starter app. The starter app is designed to show you what Aspire can do, and so it has a bunch of pre-built code. Think of it like the full Blazor demo project as well, because that's what's going to be if we use this first one, which we are. It's going to use the full Blazor with an API, with a front end, and then we're going to have a call to that API to get the weather information, which is just generated weather information, but still it's going to do that call across the API, etc. This gives you a better picture of what Aspire can do. But if you want to create a production app, you'd probably come down here and have an empty app host, a C# app host. Notice we also have a TypeScript app host. We can also create React apps for Express or Fast API or for ASP.NET Core. But we're going to choose the Blazor project. Enter the project name. We'll call this our tiny ticket. And the output path, sure, tiny tickets, that's fine. And do you want to use the .dev localhost or .dev.localhost URLs? Yes, sure. That's the newer way of doing things. Do you want to use the Redis cache? No, we're not going to use the Redis cache for this. We won't want to add additional complexity. Do you want to create a test project? Again, no for now. This is a real, when I say real, I mean it's going to be fully deployed to a server, but we're still trying to keep this as lean as possible. We could do all these things if you wanted to. Now it says, hey, do you want to configure the AI agent environment for this project? No, I'm not going to configure the AI agent project for this environment. And so we're good to go now. Okay, so if we look over here, it should be that we can open this folder and find the tiny ticket. There we go. Actually, yeah, we can open this folder and hit select. And we do. We want to trust all files in the parent folder as well. And there we go. So now there's our project. So we have, it's loading right now. We can close out of the AI chat. We can close out of the output here. I think we should be good. We can close the welcome screen out. And here is our project for Aspire. So this is going to be, again, some sample stuff. So we have our solution file, which I wish would be an SLNX file, but I think that comes in the future version probably because they're kind of lagging behind. Now, if you do it in Visual Studio on Windows, you'd get an SLNX file, which is the newer version of doing things. But not a problem. It's not the end of the world. And you can upgrade, not a problem. So we have the app host, which this is going to be what Aspire is. This is all the configuration really Aspire is right here. 12 lines of code. This is what we're going to run as well as the app host. So the app host right here is saying, hey, we got an API. We're going to do a health check on that. And then we say we have a front end, which we're going to do it HTTP endpoints on. We're going to do health checks on. It's got a reference to API, and we're going to wait for the API. So this web front end waits for the API to be running. And once all running, we're good to go. So that's all Aspire is in this project. That's it. Now, there is some configuration, probably in app settings. Nope. So that's it. It's just saying that's all the stuff we got going on. Now, we can do is we can look at our service defaults, which these are, I have a whole video on Aspire that I explain all this, but service defaults are basically, if you haven't already configured things like health checks and OpenAI and some other things, telemetry, then you can just drop these in as extensions and you're good to go, which we'll see happen in our two projects. Our API project, this is all the API is. So there's our service defaults right there for adding health checks and telemetry, etc. And then we have our configuration of OpenAPI. And then right down here is our only endpoint weather forecast. So that's it for the API. And then down here we have one more project, and that's the web project. And this is the Blazor web project. So we have, sorry for the mouse over there. We have our HTTP client, which it just references API service. That's all you need to know, because the Aspire says, hey, here's where that API service is, and it handles that for us. Now, It will still work if you deploy this to production. You don't have to deploy Aspire. Aspire doesn't get deployed. But your system will still work because what it's doing is it's pulling from the configuration, which the configuration can be overridden for where it comes from in production. And we'll work through that in future episodes of this course. We're going to use this project for future episodes of this course. This little tiny ticket app, by the way, is going to be an application that does help desk. Think just, I have a problem, I put the problem in, and then I start working on tickets and prioritize and a couple other little things. But it really is a really cut down version of a help desk. There may only be one table in SQL, which we're going to use Microsoft SQL Server for this, to simulate a real production application. So we're going to set all this up as if it's a real app, but it's a really tiny slice of it. Okay, so let's do this. Let's come down to run and debug, and we'll say run and debug. And sure, we'll launch the C# application. It says, which one do you want to launch? We want to launch the app host in HTTPS. So wait for that to restore and run. Takes a bit to get going. Once it does, yes, we have this certificate problem still. We're still working on that. So enter a token. Where I found a token, that token is going to be in the right here, which he also says where you find a token is that link right there. I'll tell you. Paste that in, log in. Cool. There is our dashboard for running Aspire. So if you look over here, you can see all the consoles and what's going on. There's a warning, etc. There's our structured logging. So we're all running. We can run the front end. Again, we will trust the HTTPS, and that pulled from the API, which you can come back over here. We can look at the console here and see what's going on with all of our calls. We can look at the traces and see right here, we call the weather, and it took 0.22 seconds. And here's the things that happened. So the front end said, hey, I need a get call on weather/weather forecast. And that went to the API service. It took 7.35 milliseconds to make that call and get the data back. And then we completed the display of our page. So all that's happening in just a click. We can come over here, the counter still works, etc. So you've got Aspire up and running now. Again, Aspire is to help make our development life easier. It's not necessarily about deployment, although that is in place for some things and coming for other things. But really, it's about making your development life easier. And this is one of the ways that I find it's really helpful is the fact that this console information, yeah, you can load this into separate consoles. You can look at your console here, but if you notice, that's really hard to look through. And if you look at output, we can kind of scroll through and find that information that we're looking for. But that's, again, difficult to look through, especially when you have multiple systems. But then we can also not just see the console, we can also see the structured logs and see what's going on with the various calls. So there's that warning about the certificate not being trusted, and we can look and see about other calls that have been made and what's going on. We can also hear traces and see where they're hitting, like that API service that was hit and not again. We can see the calls that are made and kind of track through what's going on in our application, how long it's taking. And how long it's taking doesn't really matter in terms of, it took too long because this is my development machine. My development machine might not be the fastest. In fact, with debugging, it probably isn't. But it's about comparison. So if it normally takes 5 seconds to make a call, and then I do something and now it takes 10 seconds, that's the wrong change probably. Or if it takes 2 seconds after that, that's probably the right change. So you can kind of figure these things out by looking at this trace information and getting more details for comparison before and after, etc. So you can also look at metrics if you want. These are all things that, let's look at the API service metrics. requests. Right now, there's not many requests. But you can look at all this information, find out more information about each service, what's going on, if it's healthy or not, etc. We have all of our credentials, our environment variables. We can take a peek at and see, what is that endpoint, what is, this credential or that credential. Make sure things are coming through correctly and being useful. So that's how to set up Aspire on Linux. Not really that hard, just a couple command lines. And that's the start of our app. We're actually going to take this existing application, even though, let's shut this down for a minute and take a peek at the code. Even though, go ahead and stop. There you go. So even though this is a bunch of extra stuff like the weather client, and if you come up here to the into the components, look at the pages, we have the counter page, which we don't need a counter page. We have a weather page. We don't need the weather page, but what this will do is give us a good starting point to build on top of instead of starting from scratch. So we're going to create a place to see the tickets, to add a ticket, to prioritize the tickets, etc. We'll go ahead and work on the SQL side of things to set up a database for this, which we have a Microsoft SQL Server database for. By the way, some people said, hey, I can't get Microsoft SQL Server to run on my machine because of whatever's going on. Maybe it's an ARM processor or something else. And that's fine. There's other ways of getting to that. And some people say, well, I'll use a different database. And that's fine, except for the fact that what we're trying to do here is replicate what we're seeing in production. So it doesn't matter if we can't run SQL locally and we choose a different database, except for the fact that if the production database is Microsoft SQL, it doesn't really matter if we use a different database. We still have to use SQL in production. Therefore, we have to figure out how to kind of replicate production in our dev environment. So it's not about just choosing the database that you want. It's about choosing the database that works best for production and is currently in production. So that's why we're using SQL, because that's more likely going to be the database of choice for a .NET project in a .NET shop. But not saying you can't use Postgres or anything else, go for it. But just note that's why we're trying to use Microsoft SQL Server. We'll use other database types, SQLite and maybe MySQL or something else, maybe a different, like a MongoDB or something else as well. So we use different types as we learn and work with different types. But I just want to point that out, that it's not about making a choice that you want. It's about replicating a production environment. That's what we're trying to do. So with all of that, we've got the foundation for working with our with Blazor and with Aspire and all the rest for a foundational app to create this tiny ticket app that you want to build up and out. Okay, so that's going to come up in the next few lessons. We're going to keep working on this and keep tweaking this to create something that we can kind of replicate vertical slices of every different piece of working with C# on Linux. That means building an app. That means testing an app. That means deploying an app. That means working with external services and systems. And we're going to try all of that in this Linux environment, so we make sure we understand all those different parts. Okay? So thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.